We've been talking about Islam. So the reading today, at the very end, it's about what you do. Let the beauty that we love be what we do. And that's a big part of Islam, which is they're less about ideas. They're less interested in what your ideas are and more about what do you do, like how are you bringing them into the world. One of the exercises I like to do in some of my classes is I invite people, so I'm inviting you now to just think about it. We take more time with it, so I'm only giving you a few seconds, is to think about your life now and to look at all aspects of your life, your relationships, your relationship with money, your job, what you do. What do you think about all day? Where do you put your time and your intention? And after people have spent some time thinking about their life, it can give us information about what we really believe. Because we can have our thoughts, our idealized thoughts about what we believe, but our life is a reflection. And that doesn't mean we create, let's say you're having financial challenges, or you're having relationship challenges, or work challenges, or health challenges. That doesn't mean we've created all of them, but the question is how in this moment are we responding to those challenges? Because that tells us a lot about what we actually believe about ourselves and about other people, and about our life, and about the world and our cosmology, is how we're responding to our life. That is direct feedback that we're getting from our universe moment to moment. And I love your song about being gentle, because one of the things that happens is sometimes people, that's why I want to say we don't create everything, because people say, oh, I must have horrible thoughts to have created this situation. The gentleness is, no, we're in this world. It's part of the world of duality. Joel Goldsmith says that he's never met anybody who had such horrible thoughts that they created cancer for themselves. He just said, just simply by being on this earth, we're susceptible to it. It's surrounding us all the time, these ideas of ill health and challenging, and there's not enough money, and there's a lack and limitation, and we're always surrounding that. The question is where do we go with that? And that's where our spirituality starts showing up in our life. I know that if you're here this Sunday morning, that your spirituality is already fully engaged in your life. You wouldn't be here if you weren't already participating and practicing, integrating your spiritual beliefs in every area of your life. So the question is where are those places where you want to go a little bit deeper? Not for blame, not for judgment, but is there something you want to deepen in? So I kind of resisted being here this morning. And the reason why is because there's an aspect of this I want to share. And so next week, and the first week in August when I'll be speaking, I'll be doing Sufism, which is really the loving part, and it's so mystical and beautiful and sweet. And this is a little bit more of an intellectual part, and I know sometimes we're a little resistant to that part. So I'm going to try to make it as simple, but it's so necessary as possible. And I don't want to jump into the devotional part, which is because until we really understand this, especially now what's happening in the world of Islam, in our world. So I'm going to try to do it very, very simply but meaningfully. There are different ways we can interpret things, that we have stages of development. And all adults are not at the same stage of development. So to give an example of this, why it's important is because the way we interpret something, even our spirituality, is going to be according to our stage of development. So we can have the exact same experience, but translate it differently. So if I experience this divine love is at every stage of development. So I open up, and experience this extraordinary development, and I'm at this place called the magical thinking stage. I'm going to think it's because I'm so special, and I'm magnificent, and I just think it's the coolest thing that I've received that love because I'm better than everybody else, and that I have special powers, and I might claim that. That's one stage of development. It's called magical thinking. The next stage of development is mythical. So if I experience this incredible divine love, I'm going to think, I am experiencing this love. This is God's reward for me for following the rules, for following whatever rules those are, of whatever religion, organization, whatever belief system that I'm in. It's because I've done things right. This is my reward, and I got to keep doing what's right, because if I do something wrong, I'm going to be punished. Just as much as great as this love is right now, I'm just as in danger of getting punished for not following the rules. So there's a lot of fear comes along this line, along this level of development. Most world's religions were developed at this mythical stage of development. But that doesn't mean they've stayed there. Next stage of development, I'm experiencing this divine love, but I'm at the rational stage of development, which is really the age of enlightenment, began in the 1700s. Science of mind was really developed at this stage of development. So now I'm going to say, no, now it's not personal. It's not about me personally. It's not because God loves me special over other people. It's not because I followed the rules of some organization. It's because I've practiced these impersonal universal laws. And this love just is. And by practicing these universal laws, I put myself in alignment with that which already exists, and everybody can do it. Anyone can do this. It's universal, that anyone who practices these principles can move themselves into this divine love. So I want to teach these principles to as many people as I possibly can so everyone can experience how great this love is. That this love also includes the desire of spirit for all of us to be completely fulfilled, to be very prosperous, to have great relationships, to have health, perfect job, that this love is wanting to express itself individually as me in the perfection of all life, because it's perfect and I'm perfect, made in its image and likeness. That's how, if I receive divine love at the rational stage of development, I'll interpret it. If I receive and experience God's divine love as the green pluralistic, I might not call it God anymore. I might call it, well, even at the rational, we start seeing the thing itself. The universe, life, we want to get away from the old idea of the mythic God in the sky who's punishing and rewarding. But now I'm experiencing this divine love, and I'm very sensitive, and I feel, well, not all of me is perfect. At that rational stage, we're trying for everything to be perfect, and there's parts of me that have been rejected that I've let go of. So we do a lot of shadow work. We want to include those parts of ourselves. We become softer and far more sensitive to those parts of ourselves that we've excluded. And then to society, to that love is we don't want anything that in society that's been excluded by this love, that this drive for perfection might have excluded different types of people, animals, the environment. So at this stage, we interpret love from this green pluralistic stage. And then the next stage is integral. And the integral experience of love is, wow, love is all of this. Love has shown up sometimes in me. I'm like a magical thinking, and I'm all about what I want. Sometimes this love is feeling like it's mythic, and I really want to feel like I'm conforming. And sometimes I feel like I'm practicing the impersonal laws of the universe, and sometimes I'm experiencing this sensitivity to all aspects of life, inwardly and outwardly. The integral love becomes vaster and vaster. So in every way, what we're seeing is that this understanding and interpretation of love, of the divine presence of love, gets more complex, gets bigger and more expanded. We can say it's from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to cosmic-centric, that we just keeps opening and opening and opening. This becomes really important. This is why I want to, because I remember my dad said this to me once, and because he, just so you know, he was an atheist, and I was saying, I don't know, it's how you end up in the same family. I think he was horrified that I was a child. I was saying, Dad, Spirit's really moving me to move across country to go to Agape and go to the practitioner ministerial training. And he's looking at me, and he said, now, is this the same God that tells people to bomb abortion clinics? And I was horrified at that. I'm like, what? Because to him, it's all the same, and I'm like, and it so rattled me that when I'm speaking about Spirit, which is the most loving, incredible thing, and he's equating it to bombing abortion clinics, I'm like freaked out and upset, and I'm like, how can you make that connection? And that's why this is now there's unhealthy stages, so bombing, that's an unhealthy, obviously, of no matter what stage you're at. But the point is, people do say, well, God told me to do this, right? We hear a lot about that. And I'm like, how can that be the same God that I'm listening to? Because the God that I'm listening to would never tell me to hurt somebody. And that's why we need to understand the way people are interpreting the divine experience has everything to do with what we believe humanly. We're going back to, what do we believe? How do I show up? And so when people are saying something, it's not that the divine, they're not experiencing the divine. The divine is always everywhere present. But the filter through which that divine is making itself known is through us. And it can only happen through us. And so it behooves us to really look at ourselves about what we actually believe. And is it serving our highest good? Is it serving other people's highest good? Where are we now? We're in this constant growth. When we first started this center, I had just recently heard this wonderful gentleman speak, and so I spoke about it. So for those of you who've been here from the beginning, you might have heard this, but it's the very beginning. His name is Amir Nasser, and I actually ended up reading his book, My Islam, but then I gave it to somebody, so I no longer have that. So it's by memory. Prior to reading his book, I heard him speak. He came from Malaysia to America. He had gotten involved in the integral world, so Bay Area Integral brought him here. It was one of those moments that's unforgettable. It's always when we hear a story for the first time. It was the first time he was sharing his story in front of other people. So it had this energy to it. It was a small group of people. I think there might have been 12 or 13 of us. And he was sharing for the first time in person this extraordinary story of his journey with Islam. He's from the Sudan. He has a blogger. He's called the Sudanese Thinker. So he was one of the bloggers in the Arab Spring, digital bloggers, and he had to keep his identity hidden. So that's why this was such a big moment. This was the first time he was saying, "I'm the Sudanese Thinker. I'm the person who's been writing these." His family was not totally practicing Muslim. They were Muslim, but not as practicing. But his father had a job. They moved, so he was raised at first in Qatar. He's Sudanese, but they moved to Qatar. And he was going to school in Qatar, and he had a very fundamentalist Islamic education. And his parents didn't really get involved, so he got more and more into the Islamic fundamentalist teaching, which is, you have to do this to be good, and all these people who aren't doing that are bad and evil, and they are ruining the world. And he bought into all of it. You're young. Your mind is susceptible. They also taught him, if you doubt what we're teaching you, that's Satan. So anytime you have doubt, that's Satan trying to get to you. So push that away. So up until, he said, by the time I was 11, and I don't know if he says this in the book, but I remember him saying this in our conversation. He said, I felt like I could have been one of those suicide bombers. Like I felt so much fear that these people were doing horrible things to our world, and I was 11 and I wanted to do something noble for the Islamic religion. And he said, I fell in love, I was in love with the Islamic religion, and I would do anything for it. I would fight for it, and I was against the world except for these people who believed in Islam. Then his family moved to Malaysia. When they moved to Malaysia, he ended up going to an international school. And that's where he started meeting people that were supposed to be so horrible. And it was fighting with his belief system. He had this belief system of what the world was, and it wasn't gelling. And he started getting into conversations. At first he avoided it, but then because it's scary to start the doubting. He wasn't sure if he was even allowed to doubt. But this freedom in the school started allowing him the freedom to start questioning. Wait a minute, I'm not sure the stuff I was being taught was actually true. That Jewish people are quite nice, and Christian people and Westerners aren't so horrible, and he's getting involved in the internet and experiencing people, different perspectives. And what this does is bring incredible doubt. And he said, so this Islam that he loved, then he had to break up with it. It was like, in Islam, they have if you get divorced, you have to say it three times. And it was like he was divorcing Islam because he just couldn't. Now you can't figure out what's true anymore. The problem with extremes, it goes from one pendulum to another. So he started reading atheists like Sam Harris and there's that other guy, Hawkins. So he's really embracing atheist ideas, and agnosticism and atheism is increasing in numbers in the United States, and I think that's in reaction to this extremism of any religion that people have. It doesn't make sense, so let's just ignore all, it's got to all be wrong. So he goes through this whole phase, and then he's getting involved in the Egyptian Spring, and through all this work and the Egyptian Spring, and then he's getting to know integral people. He's very vocal and active, he's learning how to integrate, come back to Islam, but allowing his interpretation of what it's saying, now it's at a higher level. So do we see the difference that as we evolve, our interpretation of what we thought changes dramatically? He had to go through that atheism stage, which often happens at the rational stage, to move into this next stage of surrendering and allowing, but now this presence is always good. It is not against anybody, and you just start reinterpreting this all the time. It's an extraordinary story, and now he wrote the book, My Islam. While he was still living in Malaysia, Malaysia banned his book, so he became in political asylum and moved over to Canada. Citizenship, is in a school of philosophy, but at the same time now exploring his artistic creative self, which is again moving into a more heart-opening place. He's done so much mind work, and now he's moving into the heart work. All of this in the guise of Islam. It's the reason why it captured me, the way he described it was like his love affair with Islam and how it was growing him up, changing him, how he was understanding Islam was changing as he was changing, his interpretation of it. So I go back to our original question of where are we in our development of our understanding? When we experience the divine, how are we interpreting it? It's really important to me. The reason why I really wanted to share this one aspect of the developmental stages at one point is because the part that always makes me cringe is when people say Islam is like this. Islam believes in terrorism, or Islam. It's the way Islam is being interpreted. I am reading the Philokalia now, which is, again, Christianity at the mythical stage of development. There's so much beautiful stuff in it, and I love it. But I also recognize, that's why it's good to have these understanding, it was written at a mythical stage of development. They are saying the same things. Don't question they don't pick a country, they just say the whole world. Reject the world, and anything in this world is trying to get your attention and to like it is evil and bad. That's Satan trying to pull your attention away from God. And keep your attention on God, and anything other than God is evil. And don't question, don't doubt, don't have any doubts. And if you doubt, that's also Satan. So they're saying the exact same thing that we hear that Amir was learning in his school. It's not because of a religion, it's because of a stage of development. And what we have to start recognizing as well, from the integral perspective, is saying there's also a place for these stages of development. The reason why that stage of development came along, the mythic stage of development, is the stage before that was it's all about me. I experience the love of God, and I'm special, and I'm great, and it's only about my people and the people who are related to me by blood. It's very tribal, it's very generic. And so the mythic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, all came along to say, no, if you have this, we can widen the circle. It went from egocentric to ethnocentric. If you believe in these values or systems, you can belong to this bigger group that goes outside of just your family. You yourself are not special. Everyone is valued if you are under this belief system. So there's a place for it in our developmental stage to move from egocentric to ethnocentric. So from an integral perspective, we recognize there's a value to it. It can be unhealthy. The mythic stage is healthy mythic and unhealthy mythic, and at every stage there is that. But to recognize that stage of development is intentional, it is not inherently evil, but what people do with it turns it around and makes it evil, makes it wrong. But it's not to blame a religion is to blame all religion, because all of these religions have some sense of, which is why people say I'm spiritual but not religious, because we can see that in religion. If you don't do this, you're going to be in trouble. And we can do it in our own religion, by the way, in Science of Mind. We have fundamental science of minders. I remember in prac class, we were in a discussion, and someone said, we were sort of different perspectives, and someone said, well, Ernest Holmes said on page something of the Science of Mind textbook, and if he said it, that's the truth. And if Ernest Holmes said it, and that is how we take anything, any teaching that we take, and we take it with a dogmatism. Well, so-and-so said it, it's true. I mean, we can even say that about the Constitution. Well, if it's in the Constitution, it's true. Well, look how much they fought about what goes in the Constitution. We're all imperfect. Nothing is perfect. We have this ability to think and to question. And so as you're examining your life and how spirit, do you allow yourself to question and to doubt? Do you allow yourself to question and doubt whether spirit even exists? Do you allow yourself to say, is that even real? Is this whole idea of the law even real? Is this idea of this ever-present love that is always good, that is always serving everyone's highest good? Certainly the planet doesn't look that way. How can I believe that? How can I believe that this divine presence is all of? When you start questioning that, does that make you afraid that you're in trouble? If you're questioning, do you feel like this divine presence might stop loving you if you are questioning and doubting its existence? At the next stage of development, what would happen if I don't always want to hear everybody's feelings? The green pluralistic stage is very soft and gentle. We like to process and hear everyone's feelings. Does that make me mean and not loving if I don't want to if I don't want to hear everyone's feelings all the time? It's like blasphemy. Sorry, I shouldn't even say it. You all are looking at me like, I had that experience once. Everyone was processing their feelings for on and on. I'm like, am I bad? I just don't even care anymore. And then I have to go home and deal with that. Like, oh my gosh, I've totally lost my heart. I don't care. Just shut up. No. We have this huge, wonderful life, and it's very complex, and the more awake we become, the more complex it gets. So the question to ask yourself is, where am I now? Look at your life. What is it reflecting back to you? How are you responding to every area in your life? The politics that are going on, the politics at your job, the financial part of your life, the physical, and all of it is about being gentle with ourselves. None of this is about blaming yourself or other people. It's information about our growth. One of the questions that someone asked me that I thought was such a valuable question was they asked, what's your growing edge right now? Because if you are doing the exact same thing today that you were doing 20 years ago, that means you've stopped growing. These universal truth principles that we teach are absolute and unchanging. So they're just as true now as they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. The question is, are you practicing them in the exact same way that you were 30 or 40, 50 years ago? Or are you learning new ways of being? What's deepening and expanding? Because so much of our journey, so the way Ken Wilber looks at religion, all religions, is that they're conveyor belts, that they were created at a lower stage of development on our earth, but a necessary one, mythic, but they're conveyor belts to move us through these higher stages of development, that they are actually a gift if we start reinterpreting ourselves. So for myself right now, I'm just going to give you as an example, as you're looking at your life, I love the integral world, and the integral world does love complexity, and I need that part of me. There is that part of me that likes to understand things, and the moment you want to understand things, you realize there's so many different points of view and perspectives, and so I will get in these discussions sometimes online with other integrists because it challenges me, it expands me, it makes me see things that I didn't see before. But at the same time, it starts to feel too heady and too complex. So I actually have intentionally gone back, which is the reason why I'm reading the Philokalia, to these mythic religions, because there's a simplicity there too. And so I'm really being with, and I'm like, my practice is actually very simple. Love the Lord, I'm okay with the word God, but I know some people aren't. Whatever word you want to use, I'm just going to say the word I use, love the Lord my God with all my whole heart, body, mind, and soul. That's in essence what my heart is. And so the work that I'm doing is to integrate like the simplicity of just loving the divine with my whole heart, body, mind, and soul, and wanting to know it as everything that I am, which is very simple, then with all this complexity. Because sometimes we make this wall, as, oh, they're too heady, or they're too emotional. And so I'm working on that, like how, because there's still a little bit of separation in me. How do I integrate all this vastness, the cosmology of the complexity of the craziness of how extraordinary this universe is with the simplicity of the mythical understanding? That's my growing edge. That's what I'm working on, is how to integrate all of these inside of me so they're not feel so separate. They're not battling each other. Or I'm only doing this now, or I just have to focus on this. How do I? So what's your growing edge? That's the question today, is how is spirituality, the talk today was practical spirituality. If it's not, I can't even say if it's not showing up in your life. Of course it is. Of course what you believe. And it's not always necessarily what you, the reason why I do the ask people to say, what does your life look like now, and to look at it, because it's not always what we consciously believe, it's what we subconsciously believe. Again, why we want to be gentle with ourselves, because sometimes we might be surprised. I don't think I really believe that, but look at what's showing up in my life. Look at these same people that show up in my life, or these same habit patterns that are showing up in my life, or these same things, and I feel perpetually stuck in them, but I don't believe that. So what's going on there? It calls us to go deeper in our life, to be gentle with ourselves. But it's giving us valuable information because our spiritual life, as I said, we're going to go into Sufism next week, and it's incredibly heart-centered and devotional. And I was saying, to love the Lord my God with my whole heart, body, mind, and soul. That's great, but how does that show up in my life? That's the practical part. It's great that I can go into my room and love the divine, and I'm blissed out. I don't know who said it first, but I remember Andrew Harvey saying it. We're so blissed out, we're of no earthly use. It's great to be in love with God, but how is it showing up in my life? So I love the divine. How does it show up in my relationship with my family? How does it show up in my relationship with all of you? How does it show up in my money and my health and my body and my relationship with the political system and the government, with what's happening in the world, with animals, with the environment? How is all of this interior love of my spiritual life showing up in my life? And where's my growing edge? So I'm saying that to myself, but I'm saying that because that was the question put to me, but I'm asking you, where is your growing edge? I see people in this community who've been doing this for a lot of years. You know, I know I've been doing this for 30 years. There's some of you have been doing this way longer than that. There's some of you who are brand new to it. Where is your growing edge? Are you doing the same thing you were doing 5 years ago? Even a year ago? Have you made any shifts? Have you made any shifts from a year ago? Have I made any shifts? Those are things to look at. How is spirituality? Spirituality is showing up. We call it new thought because it is always showing itself up new with no past precedent. It is never limited by past ideas. So are we opening? That's a nice idea. It sounds cool, but be what we do. Let the beauty be what the love that we, what is it? The beauty. Let the beauty we love be what we do. Are we allowing these wonderful new thoughts? Are we creating a space for them and allowing them to show up in completely new ways? Today, I guess it's time. Then we did, that's actually really great, I like that. Then it did 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. The principles are the same. Are we using them the same way? Oh, this is how I've always done it. Or are we using them in new ways? Practical spirituality. How is it showing up in your life? Not just in the privacy of your room, but when you go out into the world. This is a big aspect of what Islam is involved in, is, I think, a blessing for us. We're seeing the different stages of development even through this wonderful religion. And it's growing. The people who are practicing are growing. And there's people who are at the higher stages of development who get bummed out that their beautiful religion is being described only at the mythic stage of development. I know that because I was raised in a Christian family that was raised at the rational stage of development, and I have a lot of people who start talking to me as if all Christians were raised in fundamentals, like that's what Christianity is. And I'm like, no, that's not what Christianity is. I never learned any of that stuff, and I consider myself a Christian. So we have to be careful in our language too. So we have our own self, and then I'm just talking about now just the world. When we're looking and hearing people talk about any one thing, a religion, Islam, a lot of people make generic, generalized statements about what Islam is. Usually it's based on a stage of development of the people practicing Islam. And, I read the number now, I can't remember, something like 900 million people are Muslim. And to say that that's what Muslim is so vast and beautiful and diverse, that may we have the wisdom to realize that there is just as much beauty in all of the world's religions because of the people that are practicing them. And may we see the actual individuals who are practicing at the stages of development that they're at, and that we are all in this together, that we all have something to learn. Who are we not, and who are we? So even as we're doing our own growth, where are we individually? Where is my spiritual growth? Where is my cutting edge? What is the cutting edge of new thought? Where is new thought's been going along for a long time? What's the cutting edge of new thought? What's the cutting edge of our country? Where is our growth in our country happening right now? And are we open to allowing new ideas as this country? Are we just wanting to only live in the past? Or say, what is this new idea? We see all this conflict happening. We see all this incredible intensity. What's the new idea? Spirituality is in everything. What's the new idea? It's always evolving, that wanting to be birthed, that's never been seen or done before. We open ourselves to that. What is the growing edge in my life, in my family's life, in my community's life, on this country's life, and on this planet's life? What's our growing edge? Doesn't that open your heart? What's our growing edge? Rather than blaming or shaming ourselves, gentle, or other people, how is this growing? It's all growing us. What I believe and know is Spirit is always good. It is always good, and it always has been good. And there's a goodness that's been pervasive through all these evolutionary stages. And when we open our heart and we see that and feel that and know that, there becomes a level of trust than if we're always seeing with that critical eye. But again, I'm not asking you to take my word. Question, doubt, it's all good. All right, well, let's pray. Are you all going to ask this question? Where's my growing edge? Right now in my life? And so we anchor ourselves always in prayer with the awareness that we are recognizing that which already exists, that this prayer is not making anything happen. We are simply turning our attention to the awareness that there is only one power and one presence, that this one power and this one presence includes all of life. It includes all concepts and ideas and words, that it has no walls, it has no separation, but it's never limited by concepts and words. It cannot be. It transcends anything that we could ever humanly communicate with language. So even as we enter into this prayer, we enter into the prayer always with an open heart, to be willing to experience the divine that is beyond words. And so I invite you, as we move into this prayer, to at any point let the words go and move into the divine beingness of presence, because once we've touched that divine presence, that's it. That's it. There's nothing else that we need. It's already done. And today we just stand in the words, recognizing that it's already done, that this divine love intelligence is in, through, and as all creation is through every aspect of this beautiful planet Earth, all the cosmics of galaxies upon galaxies. But today we specifically speak for this beautiful planet Earth. There's so much happening on this earth. There's so much, billions of people, and 7 billion people, plants, animals, insects, the environment, the geology of the earth, everything. It is extraordinary, the vastness of this one small, beautiful diamond of a planet. And we open our heart to know that this planet is divine's planet, is God's planet. It is all aspects of it. It is on every level and dimension. It doesn't stop somewhere and something else begins. The divine is behind everything. And so we turn our attention away from appearances and put our attention fully on this divine, this spiritual presence that is right here and right now, closer to us than our very breath. That which has created the heavens and the earth, that which has created the galaxies upon galaxies, and every grain of sand and every leaf and stone and drop of water is right here within each and every one of us. That we don't need to go anywhere, that this divine power, this divine love, this divine grace, this divine goodness is right here in the center of who and what we are. And we access it in new ways. It is something we can never humanly grasp, but we open ourselves to access it and allow it to pour through us in every area of our life. We allow those areas that have been untended, those areas of our garden, of our beautiful interior world that have not been cared for, we allow this divine power and presence to open itself and care for and nurture those areas of our life that are wanting healing, that are opening for its grace, its compassion, its care around physical health, emotional health, mental health, finances, relationships, work life, the planetary life. And those areas of our life which feels like they've stagnated. They're not hurting, but they're stagnating. We allow this infinite power, this infinite newness to pour through those areas that feel stuck, that are stagnating, and we just allow and open and make ourselves available to this extraordinary light, this extraordinary grace, this extraordinary love to pour itself in new ways that we've never before experienced. We allow it to reveal to us new things that we've never seen before. No matter how long we've been on this path our whole lives, consciously on this path, we allow even that, with all that history, with all that knowledge, with all that past precedent, we allow ourselves to hear totally fresh and new. Areas in our life that need this new life, that need this vitality, that need this new way of seeing, this new way of being in life. We allow this life to be more practical, this spiritual life to be practical in every area of our life. It is who we are. We cannot escape it. And so we consciously open ourselves and make ourselves available to this fantastic, phenomenal and beyond phenomenal life and energy. Thank you, Divine Mother, Infinite and Eternal One. Thank you, Divine Presence. Thank you, life itself that is always giving of itself infinitely, freely, joyously, compassionately, wisely, bountifully as each and every one of us. There is nothing that we need that isn't already been given to us. We just open ourselves, soften our hearts, open our bodies, and say yes again, and say yes just one more time. Thank you, Infinite and Eternal One. We release this word into the law of life, knowing that as we have collectively felt this energy and this power, it is already done. And we say together now, and so it is. Amen.